Hey guys, I'm Josh Benitez and this is Texan Woodworks. Welcome to the shop. Today we're going to be talking about how to maintain our cast iron surfaces, more specifically the table saw. So stick with me and we'll find out exactly what I do to keep this puppy running smooth. So first things first, let's talk about what we're going to need. We're going to use a little WD-40. In my case, I've got the dry lube. I just kind of prefer it, and we'll talk about that a little later. Got a little bit of paste wax, some mineral spirits, a cloth of your choice, a little bit of sandpaper. Let's go ahead and take this throat plate out, get everything unplugged, and we'll get to it. All right, now that we got the saw unplugged, we got the throat plate removed. We got the blade obviously all the way lowered. Push everything to the side. Now granted, for my specific table saw, only about half of it is cast iron. The rest of it's an MDF top. We're not gonna focus on that today. So just kind of push your fence over to where the cast iron stops, and we'll focus on this main portion, okay? So let me go ahead and grab you real quick and I'll show you what we got. So you don't have a ton, but just a little bit of rust, a little bit here, some there, just kind of sporadic spots, nothing too major. So now that we've established the baseline, kind of looking what we're working with today, we're gonna go with a little WD-40. You can use your regular WD-40. I just kind of have the dry lube stuff on hand because I prefer it for, you know, the drawer slides on my toolbox, you know, all of my gears, wrenches, things like that, because it just doesn't attract any dirt. It's great for tabletops, things like that. So we're gonna start with this. And all you're gonna do is just give it a light spritz. Now WD-40 claims that this kind of helps to break the bond between the rust and the cast iron. I don't necessarily know if that's true or not. I just know that it works. It's mainly kind of serving a little bit of a lubrication point. All we're gonna do is we're gonna take that sandpaper. Now, speaking of sandpaper, you'll notice I have a random orbital sander, okay? Now, a lot of people say this is a little bit too aggressive, but keep in mind, one, I've got 400 grit sandpaper on here, so it's not super aggressive. It's nothing that's gonna be too abrasive, okay? Number two, I'm going very, very light passes, not applying any downward pressure at all, just kind of letting the sander and the vibrations do the work for me, okay? I'd rather go over it lightly multiple times than heavy once. You don't wanna dig into that tabletop, leave any sort of abrasions. You don't wanna have an uneven surface, anything like that, okay? So we'll go over this real light. From there, it'll kind of spread all the WD-40 out. It should pick up a majority of the rust, and I'll show you guys here when we come back, okay? Now that we've gone over it a few times, we've kind of loosened everything up, broke up some of that deep rust. All we're gonna do is we're gonna take that rag and you're just gonna kind of wipe it down. And that should pick up, of course, all the leftover, the kind of residue from the WD-40. And then on top of that, it's also gonna pick up the rust. So you should see your rag turn a little bit orange, which is a good thing if you've got rust anyway. That's gonna help to kind of pick it all up. It's gonna give you a good visual reference, if you will, to kind of show you that you're doing a good job. So you can kind of see right in here, you got a little bit of orange there. Boss got a little bit there. That's gonna just kind of, like I said, be a good indicator that you're doing what you're supposed to, okay? That it's actually working. So make sure and wipe this down real good. Now you may only have to go over your saw once. You may have to go over it 15 times. That's gonna be kind of dependent on how frequently you do this and how deep the rust is in your table saw. Now, also keep in mind, I keep referring back to table saw just because that's what I do this most on, but if you've got jointer, bandsaw, drill press, any other cast iron surface in your shop, this same exact process is gonna work just fine. It's really mainly for the material, not necessarily for the actual tool itself. So anything that's got a cast iron reference, you're gonna be able to use this on, okay? Couple spots you may wanna scrub. Now keep in mind when you are going over it with the sander, you don't wanna press down, but also you don't wanna keep it in one spot too long because you're gonna get some deep scratches. Now you may not be able to visually see them, but over time it will cause sort of a, you know, some flows and valleys in the surface, which again, the main benefit to cast iron is that it stays perfectly flat. And now that's given, you don't do anything crazy to it. So as long as you're not putting too much pressure in one spot too long, you're gonna keep it flat, and that's what's gonna keep your tools true and precise, which is exactly what we all want, especially, we know these puppies ain't cheap. Okay, so I'm gonna finish wiping this down, and then I'm gonna let it cool, just kind of air dry for a few minutes. We'll come right back, we'll throw some paste wax on, and we'll get moving. All right, so after we've wiped it down, kind of let it air out for a few minutes, we're gonna take this rag. It's got all that WD-40, the leftover, all the rust, all the residue. Again, that orange, that dark gray, that's good. That means you got some of the residue off, whether it's sap from the lumber you're working with, whether it's you know, rust, whether it's just built up gunk, whatever it is. You seeing it on the rag is a good thing. That means you got it all off. Okay, so we're gonna toss that to the side. We're gonna grab a fresh rag. We're gonna grab some mineral spirits. Now, I really like this Clean Strip brand. They make a lot of really, really good chemicals that I use, whether it's the thinners, the lacquers, all kinds of stuff like that. So this is the brand that I choose. So all you do is open this up. You'll spritz just a little bit of it. You don't want to get too heavy because again, that's just something else you got to wipe off the saw, okay? So we'll use just a little bit of this. And then we'll do this same thing again. We'll just kind of run through across it. And again, that's to get any sort of remnants from the WD-40, because the last thing that you want is a little bit of that grease or oil. Now again, I use the dry lube for this purpose, but just in case you don't have this and you're using the regular WD-40, it's going to leave a little bit of an oily residue. Mineral spirits will get all that up, okay? And for that next step, it's very vital because you don't want to seal that part in, okay? So let's go ahead and get this wiped up and I'll be right back. All right, so now that we wiped that down, I mean, the great thing about mineral spirits, one, it's odorless. So you don't have to worry about respirators. You don't have to worry about, you know, kids or pop a garage door open, anything like that. You don't really have to mess with it. It's super safe and it's so thin that, you know, you put a couple dabs in the rag just like I showed you. You go across it one time, you flip it to a dry spot on the rag, you come right back, and then you kind of just let it air dry for about 30 seconds or so and you're good. There's no residue, there's no odor, there's no thick gunky mess. It's just gone. It evaporates. It's great. And it's so smooth. It's been maybe a minute since it's dried. We're gonna take that second rag, toss it to the side. We'll grab a third clean rag. We're gonna grab this paste wax. Now make sure that you look at the back of the label for yours. Today I'm using Minwax. No, this is not sponsored. I really like their brand and a lot of the things that they do. So anyway, for this one, it says that you want to put it on there and leave it for about 10 to 15 minutes. Reason being, you want to let it soak and kind of settle just enough, not to bond with the cast iron or anything like that. It's not going to penetrate the surface, of course, but just enough to sort of settle. That way it's not just topical. Once that happens, we're going to take a cloth, like maybe an old t-shirt or a cotton rag of some kind, and we're going to kind of buff it just enough to where that rag slides right smooth across the saw. From there, we'll pop the throat plate back in and you're good to go. You'll get back at it. Cool? I'll be right back. Don't worry about putting too much. The paste wax does a really, really good job at kind of soaking in what it's going to soak in, and then it allows you to wipe up the rest. You're not going to have any thick, gunky areas. However, if you put too little, you will get kind of an uneven glide, which is not what you want. You want it to all glide smoothly. You want it to all be pretty uniform. So don't be afraid. Pop as much on there as you need to, even a little bit more than you think. And, you know, keep going back and forth until you feel as though it all has that kind of even glide. Also, make sure you get inside these miter tracks. Okay, a lot of times these are forgotten just because they're sunken in and you can't get them. So make sure you get inside the tracks, both sides. A lot of times when you've got, let's say, miter gauges, crosscut jigs, spline jigs, anything that you're running through here, the miter bar is what the miter gauge is what controls a lot of that. So, you know, you want to make sure and get in there too. You don't want to just have the top real slick. You don't really have to worry about the wax itself getting onto your lumber. Reason being, one, all the excess that you see now, again, after about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the manufacturer that you use, we're gonna go ahead and buff that off. So you won't see or feel any of it. It's just gonna give you a nice surface glide so that when you're pushing, you know, let's say a sheet of plywood through here or anything like that, you don't get any resistance, especially if you're using, let's say pine, or let's say rough cut lumber, or let's say plywood, anything like that that has a typically rougher surface than your perfect S4S. It's gonna give you just enough glide where things feel like you're not fighting against it, but not so much where it cakes off on the surface. Now, a microscopic, you know, molecular level type stuff may come off, but it's not going to be anything that affects the finish. And to be honest, you shouldn't be going directly from the table saw to, you know, a stain or a polyacrylic or anything like that anyway. You know, we should be doing some surface sanding, whether it's, you know, planing or hand sanding or random orbital sand or whatever it is. There should be some sort of prep process right before the finish. And that's going to knock all that off anyway. Let this sit about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we'll come back with an old t-shirt. We'll buff it off, and we'll be good to go. All right, so we've let that sit for a little bit now. It's ready to go ahead and get buffed off. You know, I don't know how many of you are dads out there, but I know that whenever you start having kids, the dad bod comes in. We don't always fit some of our old clothes. So buffing, staining, sanding, testing out polishes, this is a perfect application for those excess clothes that your beautiful father figure won't fit into anymore. So anyway, we keep that, you know, on the side for applications just like this. Anyway, now that this is set, we're gonna grab some of it. Just nice and easy. Just kind of buff it off. Now at first it may stick a little bit. It may kind of, you know, gunk up a little. That's fine, just keep wiping. Eventually, you know, it shouldn't take too long, but, you know, a couple passes and it'll start to glide real smooth. And then you'll be able, you know, basically barely put pressure on the shirt and it'll glide right across, okay? So we'll do that across the whole thing. See right there, it kind of stuck a little bit. Just go over it a few more times, kind of buff it in. Now we got this all wiped down. Glides nice and smooth. All we're gonna do is just pop that throat plate back in and we'll be good as new. Slide the fence back over. Look at that, brand new saw. No rust marks, no swirl marks. Good to go for the next build. Thank you guys for tuning in. Like I said, if you got something from this, pop me a thumbs up. If there's anything you think I did well that you really liked or anything I can do better, drop me a comment below, let me know. Also make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Also check me out on Instagram. It's Texan_Woodworks. Give me a follow, let me know what you guys think. Thanks, y'all take it easy, and hey, stay safe in the shop.